I am going to turn things over to Miss Megan Flaherty, and she's going to get things started for navigating difficult conversations today. Megan, take it away.
Hi, thank you, Hero, and welcome everybody. We are really happy to have you join us today for the Navigating Difficult Conversations with Confidence session here. And, navigating difficult conversations is one of the most challenging aspects of communications. When, each of us have faced some point in time in life where we've had to address an issue, speak up about something, and maybe it was a difficult conversation that didn't go as well as it expected. Or maybe we just avoided it altogether because you're like, ooh, you know what? I don't know if I really want to step into that. But hopefully today, after this session, you will find one or two things that you can use to apply in your difficult conversations to give you a little bit more ease and make those conversations go a little bit easier and more fluid for you. And so how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to give you that opportunity to understand what we mean actually by conflict, and then how do your naturally hardwired strengths and tendencies feed into how you respond to conflict, and then how you can use that information to adapt your own approach to having those conversations a little bit easier and have an even better impact. We want this conversation here today to be really interactive. So again, I'll just reinforce what Hira said. Put your questions in the chat. We're going to kick this off too with a poll. So we really want you to participate here with how you define conflict. So when you take a look at these images, we all have an idea of what conflict is in our own heads when we're about to address it. And when you take a look at these images, what is the image that best represents how you're picturing conflict? Give you a moment to put your answers in the poll here, that the window that's popped up.
We're seeing quite a few people say like a puzzle to solve, which is great because that's probably the most positive definition that we have. A bunch of people also saying stressful or emotional. I did that one as well. A few people saying like a tennis match or just another conversation. Great. Anyone else?
Yeah. And so let's just reframe conflict altogether. It's really not good or bad. It's how we prepare and respond to conflict that makes it easier for us to address and makes a difference here. So when you're looking at how you address conflict, it's neutralizing it. You're just preparing for another conversation. Like many of you have said, it's like a puzzle you're going to solve. And so the key is in preparation. And preparation, that starts with your own self-awareness. Now, as leaders and as colleagues and employees in the workplace, that self-awareness is really key. And it's going to give us that success and that confidence and having those conversations even better. Now, many of you on this webinar today have already taken the PI Behavioral Assessment Survey, and that gives you a great picture into where your naturally hardwired strengths lie and how you may communicate and address conflict yourself. Now, if you've never taken the survey before, you can use this QR code to take the survey. It'll just take you a few minutes to take. But if you already have taken it, don't worry about it. Don't need to take it again. Just pull up your report, or if you need help getting your report, just send a message out to us and we'll get that out to you, because that will be really helpful as part of this session to give you a couple of key elements that you can use in addressing conflict here. But what are some of the reasons why people might be avoiding conflict? Well, there's a lot of different reasons, but many of the reasons are it's really uncomfortable. How many people raise their hand and say, yay, I love to address conflict? Not many people do. There are a few out there who like to take on a challenge in addressing conflict, but a lot of people don't like it because it really feels uncomfortable. And sometimes it's just easier to keep things going as they're going and avoid it altogether. But really, that doesn't help you out in the long term, because the more you sweep things under the rug, the more that they'll build up and eventually they'll come out. So when you address conflict, it's going to help you in the long term. And one of my colleagues really had some great advice a long time back, which was, in terms of timing and addressing conflict, it's really helpful to make sure that you address it right away. And how he explained it is like, if something's really not sitting well with you, in 24 hours, well, you probably should address it within 48 hours while it's fresh, while you both have the opportunity to come into that conversation with your perspectives so you don't get too far away from it. Okay. Now, another reason why people avoid conflict is because really they're just afraid that they have rejection here. They really want to belong, to feel like a part of the group, feel a part of the team, don't want to rock the boat. But really, if you avoid addressing conflict, that's not really going to help you build stronger relationships. By addressing those conflicts, that you can build an opportunity to be more open with each other, be able to wrestle those problems to the ground a lot faster, create that environment for psychological safety so that as conflicts come up and they will over time, that you can address them even more quickly. Another reason why people avoid conflicts is that they're afraid that they're going to say the wrong thing. They might offend somebody, or their intentions might not come across as they were hoping for. And so they just want to keep the peace and keep that relationship going as best as possible by avoiding addressing the conflict. But that, again, it doesn't really help out. You gain more confidence actually in addressing those conflicts with a lot more practice, so that you can understand how you can address a conflict with stating your intentions, really being clear about what you want the outcome to be, how you can invite curiosity and come to really good resolutions together here. So when you're looking at what you can control in conflict, I'd love to hear from you. And this is where the interaction part comes in, is what do you really control around conflict here? Love to hear your thoughts here in the chat. So what do you think you can actually control?
Your reactions, your words, emotions, people are saying yourself, your approach, your energy, your control and your tone, your emotional reaction, how we respond, your approach. So I think everyone's got the key here, that it's all about just controlling yourself. We've also got your body language, your assumptions, lots of people saying your emotions, your delivery of the conflict. These are great, you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so true. The only things that you can really, truly control when you're addressing conflict is how you prepare, how you show up, and how you keep your own self regulated within that conversation. You can never control the other person and how they're going to react to things. You can only control yourself. And so that's why it's so important to bring in that self-awareness, to really have that true understanding of yourself and how you are going to then prepare and be able to communicate effectively within those conversations. And regulation is key, but sometimes our emotions do get the best of us. And so it's important to remember that, even with all the best intentions, those conversations still might be really challenging in the moment. And so it's important to remember that it's okay while you're in those conversations and things get maybe a little more emotional. That if you're feeling that come up in for yourself, that it's okay to self-advocate and say, hey, time out. You know what? It's this is really getting more difficult than I anticipated and prepared for. I'm going to need to take a time out here and come back and reconvene. Let's do that. But it's also important to remember that you can self-advocate. You can self-advocate, but you can also advocate for the other person too. And when you see the other person having a really difficult time in the conversation, that you can check in with them, see how they're doing. Say, do you need a moment here? Let's take a pause and let's come back and let's make sure that you're prepared when we come back to have a really good conversation here. Because the goal is that with a conflict is that you're going to come to some sort of resolution, hopefully, by the end of it. And in order to do that, you all need to stay in a good place with each other too. So let's talk about some of the preparation that you can do for those difficult conversations. Now, Hiro, I think, is going to drop in a worksheet for you all, and that will help you in terms of being able to prepare for these conversations. And part of preparing for the conversations, again, when we talk about this, is that self-awareness. So if you have the opportunity to pull out your behavioral assessment report, if you don't have one, that's okay too. You can always take a look back in terms of what your motivating needs are in terms of responding to conflict. And what you need to identify first are, what are your strongest motivating needs? Like what do you need out of that conversation? And then what you also need to consider here is, what is the outcome? What is the objective of the conversation? You can't, going into these conversations, you want to have the end in mind. Are you coming to a decision? Are you having a discussion? Are you sharing feedback? Make sure that you are super clear on what you want that outcome to be. And put yourself in the other person's shoes. You can't anticipate how they're going to respond every time, but you might have some history with the individual. You might be able to put yourself in their shoes and really understand maybe some of the perspectives they may come in with to help you prepare for the conversation. Again, you can't control how they're going to respond, but you can anticipate, and that will also help you in your preparation there. And then finally, you might want to take a look at all this information and adjust your approach. And what do I mean by that? Well, once you understand yourself and the outcome and how that person may react, you're going to take a step back and look at how you naturally communicate. And perhaps there are ways that you can make some adjustments there so that that other person will be more receptive in the conversation. So when you're filling out this worksheet, you'll have this opportunity to prepare for the conflict. And then it's about, okay, how do I begin the conversation? Sometimes the starting point is the hardest point. And when the starting point is going to help you set the intention of the conversation, so that when you're setting up the conversation, the other person is going to feel hopefully more comfortable in participating in the conversation. So here are some ideas on how you can actually begin that conversation. I'd like to talk about blank with you. But first, I'd like to get your point of view. So inviting them into the conversation and being really curious and understanding their perspective is going to be super important to get that flow of the conversation starting. Okay. All right. So, when you think about how you are preparing for the conversation, some of your initial responses to conflict based off of your motivated needs um, are really important to understand. And some folks are coming into the conversation, or yourself, for your own understanding of yourself. It's like, hey, I'm in here to win. Well, if that's your natural response to conflict, how do you think that's going to turn out? All right. Uh, you don't necessarily need to be competitive in these conversations, because that's not going to help you open up a dialogue here. And the idea is to keep the dialogue open. So some folks, you might feel like, oh my gosh, this is going to be challenging and in the relationship. And, if you're coming into this already defensive, that also is not going to help in the difficult conversations either. And for some folks who are, just kind of say, well, I want to see how things go. Sometimes when you wait to see how things go, you let too much time pass. And when you let too much time pass, things don't necessarily blow over. People will remember that things didn't get addressed. And with the hesitancy and not addressing things right out of the gate there, you may find that, things build up over time. So if your natural tendency is to be more hesitant, you may be doing yourself a little bit of a disservice in the long term again. And some folks are just plain worried in terms of their own natural response about, hey, I knew this was going to happen. I knew this was going to be an issue. I didn't want to have any challenges here. And so they just might be more worried coming into the conversation about what that outcome is going to look like. Okay. But what if you could flip some of this stuff on its head and reframe it for yourself? Well, if you can reframe some of this for yourself, you can get curious. And so instead of competitive and debating things, so when you find that bubbling up and you want to debate whatever the person is saying to you, it's like, well, but what about this? And how about but I see it this way. You say those things, you're not being curious. But if you say, hey, I'd really love to understand your perspective on this. Can you share a little bit more about what you're seeing here or what you're experiencing here? And that is going to open up the conversation even more there. Yeah. Now, when you want to be more collaborative, this is about building out those relationships. So, not taking things personally, but finding those ways to build bridges with each other, to build out those stronger relationships, so that when you are working on the next thing together, you're doing it with a lot more ease. But how does that sound when you're in a conversation with somebody? Well, when you're being more collaborative, you're thinking about working things out together. You're not taking things as personally, and it makes it that much easier. Yeah. And for taking action, for those who may be more hesitant, sometimes it's about taking that first step. So, if you don't take the opportunity to take the first step, think about that 24-48 time frame there, then that gives you that opportunity to say, oh my goodness, I probably should address this right out of the gate here, so it doesn't get too far away from us. And so that we can have that opportunity to nip it in the bud before it becomes a bigger issue. And for those of you who might be a little bit more worried about addressing a conflict or may have anticipated that there was going to be a little bit more of a challenge, you can say, hey, you know what? This conversation might not go perfectly, and that's okay. And that's also important to remember about navigating difficult conversations is that they don't have to go perfectly. You are going to probably hit some bumps in the road. But if you can keep yourself in a good place where you're saying, hey, if we can hear each other out and understand where each other is coming from, then that is going to help us have a more productive conversation. But again, it all starts with you and your own self awareness and where you are coming from in terms of your own motivating needs and what's important to you in the conversation and how you start the conversation, that it's going to help you make it go a lot easier for yourselves too. Is there anything in here that's really standing out for you folks who, in terms of what is helpful and or what you might have some more curious questions about? Feel free to put your comments or questions in the chat there.
Megan, we do have a question from someone who has Predictive Index, and she's asking, what is the link between conflict resolution and the PI families or the factors? Can we get an idea on conflict approach based on your PI? Do you have time to share about that?
Yeah, so approaches to conflict resolution with the PI families in terms of your reference profiles and factor combinations. Yeah, absolutely. There are some ideas on how you can manage this. If you are someone who is very independent and autonomous and really needs to drive things, and you're working with somebody who is much more collaborative and really thinking about that harmony on the team, may have to hit the brake pedals a little bit more and meet people where they are in terms of that harmony. So coming in softer in your approach is going to be super key and helping that person engage in that conversation, because you want the other person to engage in the conversation. And if you come in too strong and come in too direct, you may end up stifling that opportunity to have a really productive conversation there. All right. So in other areas, you might find that some folks are really super good listeners and have that patience and are hanging on to every word, whereas some other folks, their strengths are around moving through things really quickly, so they might not be listening as closely. And so for those really good listeners, it's really important, if you're holding on to that conversation with somebody who's not listening as well, get them to confirm what they heard. Get them to share some more information about what is going on in their heads, and that will help keep them engaged in the conversation there. Yeah. So those are a couple of ideas there that can help you out with that. Yes, absolutely.
We've got a few other comments here. Someone says, knowing it doesn't have to be perfect. So I think they're really inspired by the encouraged example. And someone says getting confirmation is game changing. So off that last tip you just said, really great. Thank you.
It really is. And I see somebody has put in for the relationship guide, and that is totally helpful here. I can't tell you how many times we've used this with clients and colleagues who are just trying to figure each other out and I've used this just yesterday with some clients saying, I'm really trying to figure out how to work with fill in the blank. Could be a colleague, could be a direct report, could be even their boss. And what this does is it helps folks to really understand where they're naturally going to meet each other where they are, and where they might bump up against each other when things might get a little more intense. And this relationship guide can also provide some tips on how to navigate those more challenging times where you might be missing each other. And guess what? We all miss each other sometimes. So when you can use tools like this that will help you out in navigating those conversations, and having this understanding even before you jump into those conversations can be super helpful. And so the relationship guide can be really, really super cool there too. Yeah. All right. So we're going to round this out here with a couple of extra helpful things that might work for you. Now, for some of you folks, you might be big readers and you like books, or maybe you like to listen to the books too. But there's some really fantastic reads out there that we have here as recommendations. And there's Super Communicators, I Hear You, How to Know a Person, and Ego is the Enemy. And these are some really fantastic books that you can listen to or read the old-fashioned way to give you some additional insights on how to build out some connections with others and have even better conversations too. And then, for those of you who are leaders here, we also offer at MindWire the opportunity for leaders to really figure out how to connect with their direct reports, even better in terms of coaching and giving feedback. And that's our Coaching for Accelerated Performance workshop. And this gives leaders the know-how, the action items that they can take to be even better coaches for their direct reports. So there you have it. There are some, hopefully, a few tips that here today that you picked up on that you can use in your difficult conversations with a bit more ease. We really appreciate you participating in today's session, and we'd love to hear from you if you have any more follow-up questions or anything else that you might want to share with with the participants here who are also on the chat.
Great. Thanks, Megan. Yeah, we have 3 more minutes left, so getting things done nice and quick for you guys. We did have someone ask for podcast recommendations. So Megan, after this, let's put our heads together and find a few podcast episodes to share along with the books. Love that. And then another comment here, Kim really appreciated knowing it's okay and when to stop and pause in difficult conversations. So thanks for sharing that, Kim. I know I find that comforting as well, because they can be really stressful. And sometimes you can prepare and go in with good intentions, and I myself can get overwhelmed and go, okay, this wasn't such a good idea. Let's take a pause, but I know we need to resolve the conflict, so we'll circle back. So thanks, everyone. We do have time for any questions. If anyone has any more specific questions about PI or addressing any specific types of conflict, you can keep things, broad and anonymous if you want to. Get just a few more.
And if you feel like you want to have a conversation post-session here, feel free to reach out to us as well.
Yeah, I'll drop Megan's email in the chat here. And you can also reach out to your own MindWire VP if you have a MindWire contact on your team. And the other thing that we want to offer here is, if you love this webinar, or mini workshop, we'll send you the recording, and you can reach out to your VP at MindWire and have them deliver this session for your team. So if you had other team members who weren't able to join and you want to experience this live together, we can do that. And we'd love to. It's what we enjoy most, right, Megan?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We really appreciate you joining today. Thank you so much. And we wish you a great day ahead. And do reach out if you have any follow-up questions or would like to have a follow-up conversation. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Good luck with your conversations today. May they be merry. All right. Oh, we have 1 minute left. I did get a question entered, Megan. How do you handle people who shut down at the very beginning of the conversation?
Oh my goodness, yes. And that can happen. And that's not That's not atypical for folks, especially if they feel like the conversation is something they weren't expecting. So, my advice here is that when you see somebody shutting down, this is automatically an opportunity to hit the pause button again. Say, hey, it looks like you're thinking things through, or this is coming off as a surprise right now. How about I just share a little bit more information with you and have you decide if you want to go and think about things and get more prepared and then come back and have the conversation. Again, you can always pause these conversations and then reconvene. The key is you have to reconvene. So whether it's in 5 minutes, 30 minutes, or in 24 hours, but make sure you reconvene in a short period of time. Don't let it linger on for weeks before you reconvene. So when you see that person shutting down, hit the pause button, give them the choice to continue or to go and have some think time and come back. Mm-hmm.
That's great. Really great. Thanks for sharing that, Megan. It can be helpful, especially if it's a surprise. And, you never want to say to someone, I need to talk to you, or like, we have a serious conversation. And that person's just going to worry for the next day or two.
Yes.
So it can be really important to kind of set the stage, hit pause, and come back. I love that.
Yeah.
All right, perfect.
All right.
So thank you again, everyone. We'll be sending this out probably by tomorrow morning, and we look forward to talking with you guys more.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Take care.